Welcome to History 1540, U.S. History from the Civil War to the present. As I just stated, this is your introductory lecture. The purpose of this lecture or this presentation is to show you the ropes, help you to be successful in this class. We'll go over a number of things. First of all, we'll take a look at the syllabus, and we'll go through it almost with a fine-tooth comb. I want to emphasize to you, and this is first and foremost when we talk about the syllabus, is that you are responsible to read it and go through it with a fine-tooth comb. You are responsible to know the information within the syllabus, and a failure to accomplish a task outlined there or do things in accordance with the syllabus, if there is an assignment or a reading and you didn't do it because you didn't read the syllabus, you don't know what textbook you're supposed to have because you didn't read the syllabus, well, that's on you, not on me. And I know that sounds like a harsh introduction, but as a seasoned college professor, my experience is that when students have problems in a class, it usually starts because they didn't read the syllabus. So I'm hoping in this case that you will. I'm Dr. Gregory Edwards, and I'm your instructor in this class. I'll give you a little introduction to myself for what it's worth. I work at Jamestown Community College as an adjunct, and I have for almost 28 years. That's not my full-time job. I am an associate professor of history at the State University of New York, Empire State College. SUNY Empire State College is one of the largest SUNY schools. We don't have a campus. We have offices around the state. I teach history at Empire State College, and I also run the Lakewood, New York office of Empire State College. Believe it or not, if you're in Olean or you're in Jamestown, there is a SUNY four-year school there that you can transfer to after you complete your studies at Jamestown Community College. And if you get an associate's degree there, there is that potential for you to transfer your entire associate's degree into Empire State College. That's a little plug for the college, promotion for the college I work for, but that's what I do full-time. This is what I do on the side. I love doing it. That's one of the reasons I do it. I love to teach history. What is my education and my expertise, areas of expertise? Well, I have a bachelor's degree from Syracuse University. I have attended Colgate Rochester, Bexley Hall, Crozier Theological Seminary for what it's worth. I have a master's in history from St. Bonaventure University, and I have a PhD in history from the University at Buffalo. My areas of expertise, or the fields that I'm an expert in, are U.S. history, 1776 to 1865. Second area of expertise is 20th century U.S. history, which will certainly be important in understanding this class and the reason I teach this class. Third area of expertise is European military and diplomatic history from 1914 to 1945, which certainly intersects with this class, as we shall see. This is reflected in what I teach for the sake of summation. A good example is what I teach at JCC. I teach both survey classes, U.S. History 1530, U.S. History to the Civil War, and U.S. History 1540, which is this class, U.S. History from the Civil War to the Present. I also teach the history of the Second World War, which I will be teaching this fall as an ITV class or as a distance learning class, depending on where we are as far as the COVID-19 virus is concerned. And I also teach the American Civil War and Reconstruction History 2100, and I usually do that in the spring. So that gives you an idea of what I teach. Now, within those fields, my primary interest is in political, religious, and military history. I tend to be interested in the intersection between religion and culture and politics, or religion and culture and military affairs. It's a unique combination, but that is what I'm interested in doing. My doctoral dissertation was in the influence of Protestantism on the ideology of the American Revolutionary War. My scholarly work is in the Civil War and the War of 1812. I'm working on a biography of a Commodore in the War of 1812 who primarily fought on the Great Lakes. His name was Commodore Jesse Duncan Elliott. He is overshadowed, of course, by Oliver Hazard Perry, but he was a significant figure in the War of 1812, as he was in the early Navy of the United States, because his career spanned from 1804 to 1845. So you name it, if you're interested in the early national period in American history, this gentleman, some way or another, was involved in everything. And then I have presented papers on the Civil War. For instance, my specific interest there is really on the intersection of the presidency with the generalship of the war. So I've given a presentation and a paper at the New York Military Affairs Symposium in downtown Manhattan. The topic was on the McClellan way of war, focused on General George B. McClellan's generalship during the Civil War. If you're familiar with the Civil War, McClellan is a much maligned general. Numerous things are said about him. He was paranoid, he was delusional, he had a messiah complex, he was a megalomaniac, he was insubordinate, he was arrogant, he was a worthless general. One historian said that the only thing that made him a general was he looked good sitting on a horse. Of course, he invented a saddle, so of course he looked good on a horse. In my paper that I presented, I argued that McClellan was actually none of those things. He was actually a good general, not a great general, but a good general. And to a large extent, his failures are due to the inability, or at least the ignorance, of his commander-in-chief, President Abraham Lincoln, which, of course, is sort of fun. I also gave a paper that was more on that subject at the Midwest Political Science Association entitled George B. McClellan and His President, which really focused in on the relationship between McClellan and Lincoln and how it influenced the course of the Civil War. So those are my interests, but I have many interests. I love American history, and I love to teach it. One of the reasons I'm a professor is I've never gotten bored doing it, even when I'm doing it remotely like this, although I would prefer to be in a classroom with you. This is the nature of where we are right now, and hopefully things will change, but who knows? Maybe students prefer the distance learning, and that's possible. That could be the future of all learning. It's hard to say. Okay. Now, what we're going to do at this point in time is go through the syllabus. I hope to go through it with you and give you an overview of the syllabus to the best of my ability. And so give me a second here, and I'm going to find the syllabus. So, just a second here. So here you see your syllabus before you. You will find a copy of it in the contents of this is the first thing that you need to know. You can find your own copy of it. You can run it off, print it off, or you can just view it in the content section of this class in Blackboard. That's where this syllabus is housed, and you can look there and find it. And I definitely expect that you will do so and read it as I already suggested. You'll see here the basic information. This is Summer 2 session 2020. Actually, that should say U.S. History 2, and I found my first typo. So that will be fixed. I'll probably find some more as we go along. The description for the class is here. I won't belabor that description for the sake of getting through to the nuts and bolts of it all. Also, the learning outcomes, I think they're very straightforward. One of the things that you want to really appreciate is that when you're taking a history class, it's not just merely regurgitating information or facts or dates. There really is an attempt, there should be an attempt on the part of the student, and a successful attempt, to, in their own terms, interpret history. I will give you examples of how that is. History is much about the what happened as it is about the why it happened or how it happened. So, how did the United States end up in a war with Japan during World War II? Well, that's a good question. It's one let me just take a few moments to talk about. I mean, the most immediate answer is the Japanese launched a successful surprise attack on our naval base and air bases on Oahu in the Hawaiian Islands, Pearl Harbor. But there were many events that led up to that, and to truly understand the why and the how, you have to go back actually to the early 1920s and look at how the Japanese became resentful toward the United States and paranoid about the United States to the degree that they didn't think they could achieve their own political goals without first nullifying our power in the Pacific to the degree that we would be no threat to them, and they would be free to achieve their own aggressive goals. And I want to emphasize that they were aggressive goals. Their purpose was to conquer territory. If you sympathize with the Japanese in World War II, just remember the rape of Nanking. Remember that they practiced biological and chemical experiments on hundreds of thousands of Chinese citizens. And the Japanese army rounded up Chinese women and made them sex slaves for their soldiers. So if you become sympathetic to the Japanese over this, and you begin to be one of those who thinks the United States is somehow the great Satan, Japan hasn't bothered anybody since World War II. They've been a peaceful nation because we pacified them. The world is a better place because of it. I can be opinionated once in a while, but my opinions are rooted in history. And so you'll see that. But anyway, but the why and how are important. That's what we'll look at. Now, next on the list is your textbooks. Both of these are available, I believe, at the textbook or at the bookstore, and you should go there and look for them if necessary. But I also want to point out to you that there is a web link to the textbook. It OpenStax to the textbook, U.S. History OpenStax, in the content section of Blackboard. So you can read your textbook there. And you'll see it there. The link is there. There will be lots of links in there when I'm completely done with the content section. I'm still working on it. Some of it is ongoing, but what you need will be there and is there in a timely manner so that you'll be able to function and successfully complete the course. We'll come back to Blackboard later. The other textbook is the Larry Medeiros Taking Sides, Classing Views on Controversial Issues in American History, or I think it actually might be in U.S. history. It's volume 2, and most importantly is that it's 17th edition. Now, I am in the process of posting almost the entire contents of that book in the content section of Blackboard. However, you are responsible to have that book, and I'm having some technical difficulties, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do what I hope to do. But you can get the textbook at the bookstore. It's also available on Amazon.com. I think Barnes & Noble has it, and I suspect you could find it at Libris.com as well. And either way, you're required to read both of those books, know them inside and out, at least the chapters that are assigned, and we'll come to that as we go along. Okay, in this class there are a number of assignments, exams, and so what is your grade going to be based on? It's going to be based on 6 two-page position papers. I'll come back to what those are in a second. On class participation via Blackboard discussion posts and exams, 3 exams. And you can see the breakdown in the syllabus. First of all, the exams all together are combined are worth 60% of your grade. So if you miss an exam, you've just missed out on 20% of the grade. That probably makes it very unlikely that you'll pass the course. The Taking Sides papers, and there are 6 of them, are worth 24% combined. Each one is worth 4% of your grade. If you miss 2 of them, you will be down 8% of your grade. And finally, participation, that is the discussion posts. They will be available on Blackboard, and weekly you will have assigned discussion posts. You will be responsible for participating, answering my questions. They aren't necessarily a right or wrong answer. In fact, what they really are thinking questions. They take you to another level of thinking about history, about the philosophy of history, about the task of carrying out history. But they will be focused also on some specific issue or subject in American history as well. So that's it. Those are extremely important. Just a word about it is that you need to demonstrate knowledge of the textbook, knowledge of the lectures, and the ability to think critically about the past, which what I mean by that is to analyze and evaluate. And to analyze something is to break it down in its component parts and ultimately determine the accuracy of something that has been said about the past. Oftentimes, individuals will make assertions about the past, and they're simplistic, and they're far from, let's say, taking into account all the evidence. And some evidence that is used is unreliable. And we'll talk about that in this class. You will see that many of my lectures are analytical, that I will go through and analyze the arguments that are made by someone. And so this will help you certainly with taking the sides. And I evaluate evidence. Is that evidence really reliable? In fact, does the evidence prove the point the author makes? Sometimes authors will present evidence that doesn't prove their point. There's no correlation between the two. Let me just give you an example, food for thought. Oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, the middle class is shrinking. And the argument they'll make in favor of saying the middle class is shrinking, first of all, it's a good question whether it really is or not. I challenge you to look to see that it is in America. If it is, that's a serious problem, because I believe our republic depends on having a strong and vibrant and large middle class. But here is what's really important. The assumption that goes along with that is that the reason the middle class is shrinking is because large corporations and businesses are getting richer because of capitalism, and the middle class is being wiped out. Well, the problem with that is that can you prove that correlation? I don't think so. I think the reason the middle class is in danger in America is because there is a direct correlation between the rise of big government and the limitations on capitalism that are wiping out the middle class and creating a caste system in America that harms the ability of individuals to rise up the social ladder. The more the United States creeps toward socialism, the more we become like countries with caste systems. As one economist who I admire greatly, an Austrian named F.A. Hayek, the United States is on the road to serfdom. I'm not such a fan of progressive history, and I'm just being honest. So I would argue the opposite, that the larger and the more a larger portion of the gross domestic product of the United States that is devoted to big government, the less likely that the middle class will survive in America. So when you get into this class, I will challenge ideas and evidence and demonstrate, well, that's true. Maybe the middle class is shrinking, but what is the real reason? It may be the opposite of what you think. And I will give some evidence to that point along the way. Which gets to one of the things that you'll find about me, and that is that I'm not really a big fan of progressive history. I'm not convinced American history really is progressive. I tend to be inclined to believe in the classical republicanism that our revolutionary generation believed in, and that saw that the history of republics are cyclical, like the seasons. And after they have a spring and they have a summer, but they also have a fall and a winter. And the more that people rely on the government and less on themselves, it's usually a sign that we're in the late fall or the early winter of our republic. I will also demonstrate that throughout this class as well. So anyway, if you are unable to write an exam, if you are unable to write an exam at the scheduled time, you must notify me in writing in advance. Students who fail to provide a reasonable explanation for their failure to take an exam at the scheduled time will receive an F. In case of illness, students must provide a doctor's excuse. A reasonable excuse, and they have to meet with me as the instructor to arrange a makeup. And the makeup will be given during the last week of the class. Students can, I don't think this is so important that I say this, but it really is important in this sense that if you have a reason that I'm giving an exam, and I'll explain why this is probably not such an important thing to have in here, but I have it there just in case, is that simply that the exams will be online, and we'll see that in Blackboard, and I give you some leeway from when you can take it. But I oftentimes have students who just don't take the exam, and they don't tell me, but I can see that they didn't take the exam. I don't email them and say, hey, how come you didn't take the exam? That's not my responsibility. That's their responsibility, and they should have let me know that there was a problem before. However, once in a while, a student has something happen. There is a power blackout or a brownout. Their computer crashes. They end up in the hospital, in the emergency room. I mean, those things do happen to students, and they can't let me know. Well, you should let me know as soon as possible. And I'm usually a reasonable person. What you need to make sure, and this is the real point here, that if you have a reason for missing an exam, it better be a good one. If it's not a good one, and you miss the exam, and then you come to me later and say, well, I wanted to go to this concert. I really, really wanted to go to the concert, or I really wanted to go see I really wanted to go to a hockey game that night, and I couldn't take the exam while I was at the hockey game. Well, those aren't very good reasons. Not that I don't like hockey. They aren't very good reasons. And you might be in trouble. You may get a 0 for your exam because of your negligence. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, you can email me, and that is how you want to let me know. Email. Send me an email. There is a means that you can email me, and also I have my email address in this syllabus. Students can choose. Next is we're talking about the position papers, and I will say a few words about the position papers in regards as far as turning them in. Students can choose any 6 issues from the 18 issues in the Taking Sides book. There are 18 issues in the Taking Sides book, and you can write on any 6 of them. However, this is really important. However, each position paper on a specific issue is due and must be submitted in Blackboard before class time on the day that the issue has been assigned. So if you turn a paper in after the issue has been assigned, and we'll look at this in the syllabus when we look at the lecture assignment schedule, and also you will see on Blackboard that I have specific deadlines that when they're to be turned in. There are no makeups, no reduced grades on position papers. Because you have 18 issues that you could choose, if you opt to not do one when it is due, that issue is off the table. And if you submit a paper on it after the due date, I will give you a 0 because you didn't turn it in on time. And you will say to me, well, that's not fair, but then you still have other issues you can do. The key is not to wait till the last minute to turn in your papers. And I have a mechanism so that you can't turn them in all at the end. And so listen very carefully. Also, by the time of each exam, a student must have submitted 2 position papers. Now, there are 3 exams in this class. So by the time the first exam comes in, you need to have 2 position papers submitted in the drop boxes in Blackboard. And in fact, as soon as when the exam closes up, 2 position paper boxes will disappear, drop boxes will disappear as well and not be available to you. So after the first exam, there will only be 4 position paper drop boxes left in Blackboard that you can view and actually submit your papers, which means you can only turn in 4 papers after the first exam. And that means that 8% of your grade will be lost to you forever. Okay? And so you can see that I have this written down here. Now, and as I already talked about, a student's participation grade is based on the quality, quantity, and accuracy of his. Here's her post to the questions in the discussion board. That's pretty straightforward and explanatory. Now, next thing is that this class is a distance learning class. It's gone from a lecture class with a blended component to a purely distance learning class, classroom component. We still have lectures, but they're remote lectures like this one, web-based lectures. But everything that you need is housed in Blackboard, except for maybe the Taking Sides book, unless I can figure out how to fix some of the problems I'm having. And so at this point in time, you definitely should buy the textbook. Okay, all exams will be taken remotely via Blackboard and proctored remotely. All exams, quizzes, and papers must be submitted through the Blackboard site for the course. Listen very carefully. No assignments will be accepted or received that have not been submitted through Blackboard. Students should carefully read the information and requirements contained in Blackboard course space for this course. All requirements and expectations contained therein should be considered an appendix to the syllabus and therefore obligatory. You are responsible for all the information in Blackboard as you are responsible for the information in the syllabus. Appendix means simply that this is a part of a binding document that you are responsible to follow. So you need to look at Blackboard. We'll do a little bit of that, but you are responsible to go through it. There will be announcements published on Blackboard. I will make them regularly. I usually email students when I put an announcement up there, but there is an announcement section. I will show it to you. Right now there are no announcements there, but you will be seeing them there, and you need to check. I would recommend daily to see whether there is a new announcement there about something to do with the class. Next, video lectures, which is what I'm doing right now. Students are responsible to watch the posted video lectures for each week of the semester and know and understand the information and concepts contained therein. They should expect that the exams in the course will evaluate how well they have comprehended and grasped the contents of the lectures. And I could add as well as the textbooks. But yes, you need to know what's in the video lectures. I'm looking for that. I'm looking for it, that you know when you take an exam what has been in what you have read in the textbooks, and also that you have read or you have watched the lectures, video lectures, and taken good notes. Those are things that you are responsible for. And the beauty of a video lecture is that if you miss something the first time, you can go back and watch it again. Okay, so now from time to time I make mistakes on my syllabus. I apologize for that. I'm human, I'm frail, I'm flawed. And although I know a whole lot about history, I sometimes make errors, and I discover those errors. So far, I've only found the one that was Summer 1, or History 1, U.S. History 1, I think it said. And it should have been U.S. History 2. I will fix that. It's a minor modification in the syllabus. But if there is some significant modification in the syllabus where I realize I've made a mistake, like I see here, it will be posted in Angel. We used to use Angel. This is Blackboard. I need to fix that as well. So those are two small ones. The Angel could be very confusing. Angel was a course platform that JCC used to use, and somehow after numerous revisions, I've still failed to get that one reference to it there. Here is a link to emergency closing procedures if you're interested in that. Those are especially important when we have winter time. In the summer, not so much, but you never know. There might be some reason. Office hours and contact information. I have given you my phone number. You can call me there. There are a couple of things I'll say about that. First of all, there are some limits. Please do not call me on Sunday. Sunday is my day of rest, and I'm happy hour in the morning. I'm not sure whether I'll be watching football this year, but usually Sunday afternoon. Of course, it won't matter for this. Actually, I might be watching the Yankees on Sunday afternoon. So that can be happy. That can be a happy moment if they beat the Red Sox really badly. But I loved it when they took on the Red Sox last year in London. And the pitching was terrible on both sides because of the dynamics of the stadium they were in. But boy, the Yankees just shellacked those Red Sox. And anyway, it's always a good day when they do. You can tell I'm a sports fan. Football, pro football, Major League Baseball, especially the New York Yankees, and college basketball. Go Orange. So anyway, so don't call me on Sundays, and don't call after 7 o'clock. Well, excuse me, don't call after 9 o'clock at night, because I don't answer the phone after 9 o'clock, and if you need to talk to me after 9 o'clock, send me an email. My email address is there. This is the official address. I think it's actually linked to my JCC email account, but this is the address that I want you to use if you need to contact me. Now we come to the lecture and topic reading assignments for this class, and it's broken down week by weeks. Next week is the week starting on Monday of the 6th of July, and it goes through the 11th at 11:59 p.m. And then you notice, and then I skip Sunday and I go to Monday. Now you may want to work on Sunday, and that's your business. But the fact of the matter is that deadlines are really for that Saturday evening at 11:59 p.m. And so you see the topics there. There is a key. In the U.S. History OpenStax, it's by chapter. So next week, by the end of the week, you should have read chapter 16, which is really on Reconstruction. And in the Taking Sides book, you have one issue, and that is 1.1. You will find that posted there. It is, Reconstruction, in Blackboard it's posted. The question is, did Reconstruction fail as a result of racism? That's what you'll need to read on that account. And then the lectures are lecture 1 and 2. Now sometimes when I give a lecture, 2 might be 2A, 2B, 2C. I might break it into sections. You'll be responsible for all 3 sections of lecture number 2. I can tell you now that what you're listening to is lecture number 1. And you'll find it, a link to this, well, of course you have found it already, in Blackboard. And lecture number 2 is going to be on the impact of the Civil War and Reconstruction. Those will be your 2 lectures next week. The lecture on Reconstruction and the Civil War is a rather long lecture. That's why I say it might be divided into 2 or 3 segments. You will be responsible to have watched them and taken good notes by the end of the week, and expect that the information very likely will show up on an exam. On the week of July 13th through the 18th is a big week. This is a 6-week class, so we're literally covering a third of a 15-week class, 5 weeks in 2 weeks. And you can see the same thing there. That next week you'll actually have 3 lectures. You'll have 5 taking sides, and you're expected to read them all, even if you don't write position papers on all of them, and I probably expect that you wouldn't write on all of them. But if you wanted to, then you'd be done by that time. If you did every one up to that time, you'd be done with all your position paper assignments. and then you will have 4 chapters in the main textbook. Essentially what that means is you'll have about a third of all the work done for this class in the first 2 weeks. And I want you to keep that in mind, because you're earning 3 credits at the college level, really at the 100 level. And so the work is accordingly. Sometimes students think they need to do less work, or teachers should assign less work in the summer. Well, you're earning the same number of credits, and so it would be an injustice to students who are taking 3 credits if you earn 3 credits and you don't do the same amount of work. Okay, and then you can see the first exam, which will be on Blackboard. Everything is submitted in Blackboard. I think that was already covered, and your exam will be posted. And it probably will open up about middle of the week on Wednesday, and you'll actually have till Saturday at 11:59 p.m. on the 18th to complete it. However, once you open the exam in Blackboard, you will have 150 minutes to complete it. 2 hours and a half. If you close the exam halfway through it, you won't be allowed to come back in. The exam is set up so that if you answer a question, you can't return to it. If you skip a question, you can't return to it. And here is a really important point. All of the exams in this class are open book. So you can refer to lecture notes. You can refer to your textbook if you need help. I would just recommend preparing well enough that you don't need to do that, because you still have a time limit. Okay, that's an example of the syllabus, and I hope you understand. Now again, the first exam will be closed automatically at 11:59 p.m. Also, the 2 first drop boxes will disappear at 11:59 p.m. on July 18th. You can see my grade chart here at the bottom. The grade key, you can see that if F is a 0 to 64, if you get a 65, you'll get by the skin of your teeth. And A is a 91 to 100. And all of that, there is a little margin of error. If I end up with no one getting a 91, someone gets a 90.3, I find a way to usually give them the benefit of the doubt and raise their grade. And the same is true of students. If you're a conscientious student and you find yourself on the sort of fence there between one grade or the other, if you've been working hard in the class, and it's not because you haven't turned in work or something, but you've done everything and you end up with a grade that's sort of on the edge, I usually bump students up. And I do that fairly. I wouldn't just do it for one student, not do it for another. So there is some leeway on that account. Now we have a number of things here, civility statement, etc. I'm going to let you read this. It is extremely important. Now we aren't in the classroom, so that isn't so important. Some of the things here don't really apply to what we're doing in this case, but you do need to read it. The real key to civility is whatever you would have someone do unto you, do also unto them. So I always try to treat students with respect. Unless they prove otherwise, I give them due respect and treat them as well as I would like to be treated myself. I hated it when a teacher was such that I couldn't ask a question, even if it was a dumb question. When somebody tells you there's no such thing as a dumb question, I think that's false. But I'll tell you a secret, all of us have asked dumb questions. I have asked dumb questions. And I want to be treated like a human being, like a person who matters, a person of worth. And I do the same to you. So the worst that you might get, the closest to a jab you might get, is if the question that you're asking is something that's in the syllabus or clearly evident in Blackboard, and I'm suspicious you haven't read Blackboard or looked at it as you should, which is your responsibility, I might say as per the syllabus or as per Blackboard, and you'll know that I'm suggesting that you need to look more closely. But I will never say anything that would be harmful or hurtful to you. And I take that very seriously, and I hope that you will do it the same way. Now, as a matter of civility, if we have a conversation at some point, that means I did forget something I want to come back to. And that is that I would appreciate it if you would address me as Dr. Edwards. I worked very hard to earn the title Dr. Edwards. It's a piece of property. It's mine. And if you were a doctor, I would call you doctor. I always call my medical doctor, doctor. I don't say, hey, Joe, or hey, Tim. I say doctor. And so I would appreciate the same kind of respect. And on the other hand, I won't say to you, hey, you. I will call you, whether if you want to be called by your first name, or if you say I want to be called Mr. So-and-so or Ms. So-and-so, I will be happy to call you that. And address you as you choose. Okay, now, I want to go back. I will go back to my office hours in a second. I skipped over that and I just realized it. Okay, academic integrity. That academic integrity is plagiarism of any sort. It is not giving credit for ideas, thoughts, and concepts to their authors. Cheating and plagiarism are prohibited, seriously prohibited at JCC. And you can get a failing grade in the course, and there is a link to find out more about it, to avoid it at all possible costs. On your exams, I expect your exams will be in your own words. You won't just copy and paste portions of the textbooks or a website. That's plagiarism, because you're saying those are your ideas. You will give sources for your ideas if they're someone else's ideas. Okay? And then there are disability services, and that shouldn't be Nancy Callahan. That should be Donald Poole. I apologize for that mistake. Again, I found 3 errors here, and I hope you'll forgive me for those 3 errors. I will correct them. And finally, we use Starfish in this class. If you want to schedule an appointment, you can see that there. Now, I'm going to go from this screen to Blackboard and give you a little overview of Blackboard. So bear with me. I'll be right back. So here what you see is the home page for Blackboard for this class. You'll see that it's 202008, 2020-08. And it's merged. There are 3 sections actually of this class because it was originally an ITV class. U.S. history since 1865. You can see a number of links here. The home link is there. Announcements. At this point in time, I don't have any announcements in, but they will be coming. And the content section. And so for now, we're going to go to the content section, and I'm going to show you the content section. And like I said, some things that may be there are things that will be gone and are of no use. It's under construction because I'm taking a lecture blended class and turning it into a purely distance learning class, and so there are some things that are under construction. But I will try to point out those things that are important that you need to be familiar with. Here we go. Okay, the first thing is, you're interested in finding a copy of the syllabus. There it is, the first thing, and all you have to do is click on that link, and it will open up. Click here to read your syllabus. Also, if you are interested in the textbook, you click on that link, the textbook will open up. I mentioned my office hours. My office hours are Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m., and here is the web link. They're on Zoom, and if you want to talk with me on Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m., all you have to do is click on that link, and it'll open up and you'll be able to join me there. Here is the position paper rubric. And actually, I'll open this up and show it to you, because this is important information. Here we go, and I opened it up for you there, and what you can see is how to get an A, how to get a B, how to get a C, how to get a D, how to get an F, and then I hope this is helpful. I won't read it through, but you should look at it, and the only thing that's missing there is that your paper should be, well, they are double-spaced. Minimum of 2 pages double-spaced. And I have a recommendation, 5 paragraphs. I think this is a very clear statement of what you need to do to get an A, what you need to do to get a B, what you need to do to get a C. C, by the way, is average work or satisfactory work. Lots of students think that a C is a bad grade. It's not a bad grade. I think that most students would want to do better than a C, but the reality is that average means that you're doing about like everyone else is doing. A B means very good work, above average work. And A means superior work. And I want to emphasize that, superior work. Usually in my class, if I have 20 students, I might have 1 person who gets an A. 30 students, maybe there's 2. The bulk of my students get B's and C's. And that's not because I have a curve. It's because my class is constructed such that that's what the outcomes come out. And that is usually a sign that what I'm doing works pretty well. If every one of my students got an A, they would either be brilliant students, but I would be most likely believe that that is a sign that there's something that I'm not doing well. Either my exams are too easy, or I don't know what else. But normally that doesn't happen. And once in a while I do have more students, and I rarely, trust me, I don't in any way nick students because everyone does well. I just say hurrah for the students. Okay, so let me go back here to Blackboard and you'll see what we have there. Okay, so the textbook is there, the Zoom office hours are there, the syllabus is there. Let me go down here a ways. Whoops. Okay. You will also see 2 position paper drop boxes. If you want to submit your paper, you click here, it will open up, and you'll be able to put your paper in there. You'll be able to upload it into that drop box. And there's drop box number 2. Right now you can't see the rest of them, but they're there. Right below that, you will see issue number 1 in the Taking Sides book, TS issue 1.1. And there it is in all its glory, and you can read it. And in fact, they're all there. The next one is there. Did the New South emerge from following Reconstruction? There actually are 4 that for technical difficulties I haven't actually don't have them in at this point in time, but hopefully they will. I have to rescan them and try to get the bugs out so that I can, no, there's no viruses, just technical difficulties. And so it's there. What you won't see here are any of the exams because they are not visible at this time. They won't be visible until they're opened for you to take. But you can see that all of these Taking Sides issues are there, and that's the most important thing for you to see. Now, there is a grade book. There are some lecture, but those things will probably be gone and replaced with a lecture. But you will find one lecture here. I don't see it. Oh, it's not available yet. But there will be web links to lectures. And so they will appear soon. Actually, I'll show you one, and I have to go out of this view to my view briefly. I don't like to do that because I don't want students to see my view because it's different than your view. But here we go, and right here, somewhere down here, there is a link. There it is. And so, for instance, if I wanted to open this lecture, I could just click on this, and it would immediately open up one of these video lectures. And this is one near the end. The last time it was in another class, it was due by May 6th, 2020. I need to change that. That's why it was hidden from your view, because I'm not done editing it. But that's what it looks like, and you will find it there later on. So let's go back to the student view. And back to content. You can also see your grades there. I would explore Blackboard if you've never used it before. There also is a help desk at JCC that can help you with things so that you can read them all. But you can see that I have all these lovely pages of writing here, and they're available to you. So I'm going to close this out, and we're going to go back, and we're going to just talk for a few moments about history itself. And so bear with me for a second. So this slide is entitled History, Food for Thought. Have you ever asked yourself what history is? Historians argue and debate that. But students oftentimes have never really thought about it. I'm actually surprised that some historians have never thought about it either. I'm always a person that likes to define things. Somebody says, the rich haven't paid their fair share of taxes. And I say, well, what is their fair share? What is fair? Which is another way of saying, what is justice? And usually someone will quote some statistics, but those statistics don't really tell me what justice is or what fairness is. So, just like that, somebody will say, that's history. Well, how do you know that's history? What is history? That's a really good question. What is history? Some people will say it's just the past. Well, how do we know what happened in the past? And if we don't know what happened, is that history? I mean, I've read books where people make up conversations between two historical figures, but you don't know that those conversations took place at all. And that's a really important point. What is history? Let me give you my definition briefly. It's the documented past. And I might even be a little more specific and say it's the reliably documented past, because some documentation isn't very reliable. We have this thing called oral history, and I sometimes call oral history an oxymoron. Can there be oral history? Can you take an interview of someone 50 or 60 years or even 30 years after an event, and can you consider it really reliable? Now, that might depend on the culture. In some pre-literate cultures, people memorize things and were far more adept at remembering the past than we are. I have to write everything down. If I don't write it down, I don't remember it. Although I'm not using any notes right now. But here is the thing. Usually historians think of documents as either artifacts, which also sometimes can tell a different story than what a historian says they say, or written documents. And then even among written documents, some are more, let's say, reliable than others. So anyway, we'll come to that maybe a little bit more. But is history true? I mean, that's sounds like a dumb question. But is history true? Behind that question is the understanding that if it's not documented, we don't know it. So here's the truth. Most of the past is lost to us. Most of the past is lost to us. I'll give you an example, and it's an extremely important example, and you will see that historians have written thousands of pages, maybe hundreds of thousands of pages on the history of slavery in the United States. And some historians focus in their histories on the experience of the slaves. But here's the problem. Most of the slaves were illiterate. They couldn't read or write. So how do we know what they really were thinking? How do we know what they really experienced? Do we know what their aspirations were? And what we often do is read back into the past our own assumptions about the past. We assume that because slavery was a brutal institution that the slaves were unhappy. It seems to be a logical assumption, but how do we know that? Well, once we go to oral history, then that's what some people do, because there are slave narratives that were written after the fact, many years later, or interviews that were taken and slaves told their story. But the trouble is that those stories tend to reflect more on the present state of mind of the former slave than they do on what actually took place in the past. Now, one of my favorite examples of that is the story of a slave woman. She was free, and in the 1930s, she was interviewed by the federal government, and an individual was sent under a New Deal program to interview her, and she told the story, and the story she told was that her master and mistress were wonderful, kind, benevolent, and that she was happy as a slave, and she was a child, because by 1930 she had been around almost 70 years, so she was a child, maybe at the best a teenager. That was a long time before. She told the story that way. But there was a snafu in the federal government, and another interviewer went and interviewed her. And this time she told a very different story. Her master and mistress were cruel, brutal, oppressive. She was extremely unhappy, and she had a longing to be free. Here is the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. The first interviewer was white, and you guessed it, the second interviewer was black. Now, who do you believe? Well, many of you would say automatically, the African American who interviewed her, she must have told the truth to her. Well, life experience tells me that that's not always the case. She might have genuinely liked her master and her mistress. They may have been. That doesn't mean that slavery wasn't a brutal, cruel institution. It just may have been, she might have been one of those who, by chance, fortune had a better master than others. There were fewer whippings on the plantation. And she may have had a nostalgic view of the past, especially considering that at the time of the New Deal, the country was plummeting into a deep recession or depression. 25% of the American population was without sustenance. As a consequence, the days of yore may have seemed different at that time. And also, there tends to be groupthink. When I worked my general experience in working is that people don't like the boss. And so when the boss is away, they say nasty things, and even people who think otherwise won't dare to say it. In fact, they will follow the crowd. Possibly the second interviewer got a more accurate story, but we don't know that for sure. So what is true about history? Well, that's again why we go with written documents, written as close to the period as time. But the trouble is with history is that we don't know everything about the past, nor can we ever know everything about the past. But does that mean that people can write whatever they want? Well, I don't think so, because if they write whatever they wish to, then it becomes fiction. We can only write what truth that we know, and that is where history is really history, is if it's the truth that we know. And this gets to the point. How can we distinguish history from fiction? Can you distinguish the two from each other? I've suggested that that's problematic, but history is the documented past, as I've said. Let's take, for instance, a book by Stephen Sears called Gettysburg. Stephen Sears is a superb historian. I don't always agree with him about the Civil War, but his book on Gettysburg is a superb book on the Battle of Gettysburg. I would highly recommend it. I'd probably recommend it above all other books that you might read on Gettysburg, because Sears dug into the primary sources, and he built his history. He wrote his history based on the documented past, the after-action reports, the journals, the letters, private letters of those individuals who were involved in the battle, from the generals all the way down to the privates, where it was possible to find someone's diary. And so that is history. On the other hand, you have a lovely series by the Sharas. I think one of them is The Killing Angels, and that's the one about Gettysburg, and there was a movie made based on that, with Jeff Daniels playing the part of Josh Chamberlain, Lieutenant Colonel Josh Chamberlain of the 20th Maine. I love that movie, but it's fiction. Josh Chamberlain gives speeches that we have no idea that he ever gave. He talks and carries on dialogues. So does Lee, so does Longstreet. That, yeah, they're based on things that these individuals said at one time or another, but we don't know that they said those things at that time and that place. Most of the movie is about what people are talking about, and what they were thinking at the time. It's fiction. It's not history, because you can't make up what authors or what historical actors actually said if they didn't say it. If you can't document that they said that, then it's fiction. Don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean historical fiction should be thrown out the window. Sometimes it's a good introduction to history because it whets somebody's appetite to find out what really happened. I.e., I once read Gore Vidal's Lincoln, and I was so intrigued with his revisionist view of Lincoln that I began to read everything I could about Lincoln, and I found out that, yeah, Gore Vidal is writing historical fiction. Again, maybe that's an oxymoron, but it was fiction nonetheless. But it was fun to read, and if it perks your interest in history, that's great. Just remember not to take it too seriously. And in fairness, though, some historians call something history and it really isn't history. I can think of a number of cases. One that I will only mention briefly, and that is that there's a historian called William Appleman Williams. That's his name, I mean. He wrote a book called The Tragedy of American Diplomacy. And you'll actually get a taste of this because he opened the door for a whole set of historians, New Left historians, to critique the United States' conduct in the aftermath of World War II and ultimately place the responsibility for the Cold War on the United States and not on the Soviet Union. Well, the trouble is that William Appleman Williams, quite honestly, was a dishonest historian. Unfortunately, many of his ideas have found their way into American history textbooks. If you think I'm making that up, well, I'll give you my source. First of all, read William Appleman Williams. I have. And then I would read a book by Robert James Maddox entitled The New Left and the History of the Cold War. Robert James Maddox. It's a little tiny book, and it's a scathing critique of the new left historians who try to blame the United States for the coming of the Cold War, and especially Harry Truman. He demonstrates very convincingly that they played footloose and fancy-free with their documents, oftentimes placing them out of context, splicing together quotations to make Stalin look good and Truman look bad. And if they had to do that, then you have to ask, what is the real history? If you want to read a good history of the Cold War, I'd read John Lewis Gaddis's. Okay. And then, of course, in history, what matters most? How everyday people did, the deeds and accomplishments of great individuals, technological advances. Now, those are good thinking questions, and I've sort of leave you with them. We are very interested today on how everyday people did. But did everyday people change the world? Now, right now, we have a lot going on in our country, and I hate to contextualize this too much, but recently we've had individuals pull down statues of Christopher Columbus because they don't like what he did. Well, here is the reason they don't like what he did, is he changed the world. Maybe they don't like the way he changed the world, but he changed the world. We don't know much about the sailors that sailed on his ship because they really weren't responsible for changing the world. They helped him change the world, but it was Columbus's vision, his aspiration to find a way to the east that transformed the world. If you were taking U.S. History 1, I would go into this more, but I will just simply say this. Columbus is probably the most important individual in the last 500 or 600 years of human history. Why? Because he melded the wealth of 4 continents together to the advantage of the Europeans. Now, you may not like that, but that is the truth. So that today, Europe and its ancillaries, the United States, which is really a projection of Europe, dominate the globe. In world history, we talk about the Europeanization of the world. Before Columbus, Europe was the back barnyard of Eurasia. There were other great civilizations, the Middle East, India, China. Europe was a big barnyard because they were basically involved in farming, and Europe was resource poor. But after Columbus came to the New World, everything changed. And if you just don't get that, the United States is the greatest power in the world. And of course, would the United States have even existed? We can't say that it would have. But that's the point. We can't say that it would have because that's counterfactual. There's no evidence of what would have happened if Columbus hadn't have come. But Columbus did come. And a chain of events took place that led to the rise of the United States. And let me suggest on the positive side, the United States has been the great promoter of freedom around the world. Oh, you wouldn't get that if you were paying attention to the news today, but it's in fact the truth. The United States has done more to promote freedom around the world than any country in the history of the world. So, and we'll do that. There will be, in this class, there will be a challenge to progressive history. There will also be a challenge to the critics of American history as well, to the accomplishments of the United States. We are not the great Satan. We, in my mind, and I will make this case throughout the class, that we are still the last best hope for humankind. So, and that comes back to what great individuals did. But it also has to do with technological advances, which sometimes you can't separate from great individuals. But technology changes the world. So who might the greatest individual have been in the 20th century? Well, that's a good question. Who was it? Was it FDR? Was it Joseph Stalin? How about Henry Ford? Think about how Ford's assembly line process on building automobiles has transformed the world. And there it is, the technology, in the end, may be the most important side of human history. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this. I went a little longer than I wanted to. If you have any questions, email me. I will be having office hours Wednesday at 5 o'clock on Zoom. The link again is there. Please join me. I would really like to talk with you and get to know you. It would make me very happy if all my students showed up for my office hours. I would extend them a little bit to make sure I was able to talk to everyone. Okay. Have a great day. Bye now.